Hi, I'm Dan from HPC. In this Toolbox Talk video, I'm going to be talking about the control of hazardous substances. In this video, I'll be outlining what a hazardous substance is, the risk from these substances, and also explore how we control and manage substances to ensure they are handled safely in the workplace. So, first of all, what is a hazardous substance? Well, a hazardous substance is any product or chemical that has one of the following properties. That it's explosive, so it can explode or cause explosions. It's flammable, so it ignites easily or burns rapidly. It's oxidizing, so it could be gaseous, solid or liquid and can cause an intense fire or explosion. It could be toxic, so it can harm people that enters the body through contact, ingestion or inhalation. The effects can be mild to life-threatening and can be immediate or long-term. They can also be corrosive, so they can cause skin burns and eye damage. And lastly, they could be ecotoxic, so they could be toxic to the environment. Typically, product packaging and containers will display pictograms that outline if any products may be harmful or hazardous. Before working with these substances, a risk assessment is essential and can allow you to consider the following questions. How can exposure to these substances be monitored and managed? Is it possible to substitute the substance for a safer alternative or eliminate use altogether? What controls can be put in place to minimise exposure, and how are these managed and by who? And if usage is required, what additional measures can be put in place and what personal protective equipment should be provided? So, I just mentioned control measures for managing these hazardous substances. Let's explore some of these measures. The first step would be to identify any hazardous substances being used and create an inventory of these substances. For any substances being used, safety data sheets need to be accessible for workers. Additionally, training should be provided for all workers who are working with these substances, providing them with clear guidance on safe use. Next, it's vitally important that any substances are stored in suitable containers, that they are labelled correctly and stored in a safe and suitable location. How and where they are stored is dependent on the substance in question. It's also important that signage is in place and clearly visible in an area where hazardous substances are being used or stored. Lastly, in case of any spillages, it's important that any spillages are managed swiftly and waste is disposed of in line with guidance provided by the safety data sheet for that substance. To that last point, in the case of a spillage or any other incidents involving the use of hazardous substances, it's important that an emergency plan should be in place. This is something that should be included when workers are trained on how to work with hazardous substances. When dealing or preparing for an emergency, here's what we need to consider. First, we need to have a site plan with all locations of all hazardous substances locations clearly marked. Staff must be trained on how to correctly use PPE, and also an understanding of first aid is required. Workers need to know where wash stations are and how to treat people who may have been harmed or injured. We may also ask what is the procedure for contacting the emergency services. A clear plan for contacting the emergency services is vital, with workers having an understanding of how to describe the emergency with accuracy. Lastly, in the case of an emergency, workers need to know how to manage the area of the accident. A procedure should be in place that covers how workers can restrict exposure to the incident area, how to reduce the severity of the emergency, and if possible, how to address and eliminate the issue, but only if proper training has been provided on how to do so. To end this video, let's just run through some of the big don'ts when it comes to working with hazardous substances. So the first one is do not smoke, drink or eat when working or handling substances. Do not expose others to fumes, dust, gas or other dangers from hazardous substances when you work. Do not use hazardous substances when you're not trained to do so. Do not leave hazardous substances around the work site. Be sure to store them straight away. Do not use any hazardous substances that are not labelled. And lastly, do not store hazardous substances above head height. All of these lead to the risk of the endangerment of your workers and heighten the risk of an emergency occurring. If you need support relating to the control of hazardous substances, the HPC team are equipped to provide you with training, documentation and guidance in this area, ensuring that any hazardous substances in your place of work are dealt with responsibly and most importantly, safely. Thanks for watching. If you have any topic that you'd like to see covered in a future video, please drop a comment below. If you'd like to speak to a member of our consultancy team about the contents of this video and how we can help, you can find our contact details in the description of this video also.